concluding on Tuesday with a talk by our own Lauren Carruth, and along with professor at Georgetown, Laura Smith, Building One's Own House, Power and Escape for Ethiopian Women Through International Migration. They have done field work as medical anthropologists on the continued migration, believe it or not, of peoples from the Horn of Africa and the East Africa into the Gulf region at a time of war in Yemen and so on. So please join us for our concluding session this Tuesday, the 17th of November at 1 o'clock. But join me now in welcoming first Dr. Dilshad Deniz, who is in the anthropology department at the University of California at San Diego. She will speak first for about 15-20 minutes, right? And then we'll be followed by our own Dr. Dilan Okçoğlu, who is the SIS Barzani Postdoctoral Fellow in Global Kurdish Studies, who's been with us since last January, virtually for most of that time. But I hope that we'll all be able to meet one another in person before her fellowship comes to an end. So we'll let them speak for, it sounds like maybe 30 to 35, 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up directly to all of you for a question and answer period. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Dilshad Deniz.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you for everybody who actually put labor in this conference or symposium, what you called, I just forgot. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me to join you. Yeah, I think the structure was first to Dilan should speak and then I was going to follow, but anyway, so I would not mind to speak first. But first of all, I feel that I maybe should explain what I mean by the Kurdish Alevis. So in that case, maybe a little bit briefly to share one of my, the Alevism, I do not define Alevism inside the Islam as a sect of Islam. I have reason for that because the Alevis, they do not really follow the Islamic pillars at all. In some cases, because of some kind of security reasons, survival strategy as a survival strategy, they use sometimes like they say they are Muslim in a way, but if you look at the ritual, if you look at the philosophy, if you look at the practice and the jurisdiction of the Kurdish Alevis, of Alevism itself, but particularly Kurdish Alevism, nothing to do with the Islam, but the only connection with the Islam is through the Ali and his family, who were actually massacred by the Muslims as well. So because of that, I define Alevism as an old Iranian religion, which is coming from the same root with the Yazidism, Yarsanism, Kakaism, and I think also with the Druze faith as well. They're coming from a very old root and same root, but they have, I think, localized in different parts of the world. That's my definition. So starting with this, and then I will go with the borders, what I mean with borders. For me, borders is, I'm not talking about physical borders, even though we have like some physical borders with the like Alevi question, but mostly I think we are looking with the sort of internal, in some way, like non-physical, fluid, sometimes psychological, but sometimes like the practice of the state. So there are certain borders that both sides actually seeking for it. So going through my presentation, the Alevis in Turkey, let's say how they've been sort of defined and named, the Kızılbaş, Bektaşi, Tahtacı, Sıraç, Çepni, Yörük, Nusayri. But the Kurdish Alevis recently the academics trying to sort of name as, use the name of Ria Haki. The reason for that, because in Alevi society, inside this society, they never need to have like name for themselves. They would say, this is our path. This is Riame, for instance. The main thing actually is the path, because the whole process of the religion is accepted as a kind of journey. So this journey can be physical, but at the same time is very spiritual journey. That is actually the main like bone of their philosophical way of looking at the world as well, because according to the Alevi faith, this is like the circle of the life. You never die. Actually, death means the rebirth again. This is the main backbone of the Alevism, based on the reincarnation process. So you, depending on your practice in the daily life, so you will be sort of born in a next form of your next life. This continue like more than 1,000, and then in the end you will be like part of the whole through the universe. So that's, for them, Hakim means that the whole universe, and you're always part of it. But during this process, this journey, you will like trying to be sort of reformed, your like humanity, part of your spiritual mind will be shaping, and in the end you will be like the perfect form, and you will learn this spirituality, and you'll be like a pure human being, and then you'll be part of the happy, means the truth. The truth itself is like whole process, whole universe, that you are part of it. That's why in Kurdish Alevism, and we have like two kind of God formation. One is Khwede, means the giving from itself. That's everything like comes from him. I say him because it's now become more masculine, but normally I think the name of Khweda means the Khwedaza, means the like some kind of goddess. I think sort of cut from the like language just recently, when actually the formation of the society become more masculine, I suppose. So therefore, Alevism is like philosophically, and it's sort of departs from the Islam at all in many ways. For instance, Kurdish, the Alevism, you cannot convert in the Alevism, you burn him. And secondly, for instance, the violence, particularly killing another like human being and also the other creation, is prohibited. And because of that, so the conversion is not possible. Like killing for the religion is not possible, and that's another like weakness of these religions, that they cannot really resist against the religions that using like violence against others. So and so because of that, the philosophy of Alevism, for instance, it doesn't address like gender. It's very unisex. That doesn't mean that the Alevi society are like very equal, like seeking equality between the genders, but because the patriarchy's culture like becomes so dominant. But normally the religion itself is very, very equal to both genders. It is unisex. For instance, you cannot like find anything from any like the religious like songs or like teaching or something that address a particular gender. This is not possible. It's become like a little patriarchist because the culture went turned into a very patriarchist form. And so if you like compare all this, you cannot really consider it's part of Islam, because totally on the opposite side of it. While Islam, for instance, like glorify killing for the religion, Alevism, it's refusing it. Anyone that has and commit any crime or kill anyone cannot ever join any ritual, Alevi ritual. So, and if even like you looking from this point, you cannot really say this. Why it's like considered as Islam? It's with in the like eye of the state, because the state is like formed on the Turkish Islamic synthesis. Never ever like part of Islam, but why they try to like form it as a part of sect of Islam is there are two reasons. First of all, once they do not want to like give any services because they like collecting tax from the Alevis as well. So in return, they should like give some services to them, religious services. They try to avoid from this. And secondly, they gradually forcing people to convert into Islam and changing the philosophy, changing the terminology, and changing the information, knowledge of the Alevi society, like using several methods. Since the like formation of the Republic, actually, it's not like recently maybe become more tense, but they always has been like this. Okay, and now I'm talking about the borders. So because this confrontation with the state and with the Sunni, particularly Sunni Muslims in Turkey, and like borders, that's sort of physical borders, but most importantly, non-physical, fluid, sometimes psychological, mental borders that actually created for the Alevis in Turkey. So yeah, okay. In this process, I'm focusing on the Kurdish Alevis. Mostly Kurdish Alevis do not consider themselves some other thing, but the Kurmanj means that in the word of the Kurdish Alevis, Kurmanj means both Kurdishness and both being like in Alevi faith, reality. So when I talk about the Kurmanj like this, and in some other part of the Kurdistan, for instance, Sunni people, they would say, "Oh, this is it really like this?" Yeah, I said. But in the like other Kurdish part of Kurdistan, particularly Sunni Kurds, the Kurmanj means like poor or peasant or something like this. This actually explain our theory, because the Alevis, when the Islam and also the Christianity, when they were like powerful crusaders and so on, because we are talking a very old religion, this is my perspective. And when these like sort of invader powers approach to the land, so they had to sort of go somewhere to protect themselves. And that's mostly like highlands. So if you look at the geography of Alevis, not just Kurdish Alevis, but also Turkish Alevis, mostly they live in a very like highlands where they actually can survive. So this is actually how they create their borders in Turkey. So yeah, this is a part of my definition, that how reality like shaped, and like nature worshiping, like ancestor cults, and a little touch with the Islam through the Alian family. That's only the Alian family, nothing else, that who actually being killed. And the definition of Ali is nothing to do with Ali, who actually were like the commander of the Islamic army, and they were killing people, trying to force people to convert in Islam. Is nothing to do with this personality. This is Ali that actually has another like construction of personality constructed according to the Alevi belief. So we are actually talking this with the name, using the same name, but constructing totally different personality from it. So we have like nature worshiping, very important, and actually this is how the sacred geography of Alevis becomes so important, and the borders that based on this sacred geography actually is a kind of like the gratitude to this land actually they survived on. Very nature friendly faith. So, and then I will, for instance, this is that in two times a day that a Kurdish Alevi person would like go to when the sunrise and when the sun went down and like worshiping to sun and as a part of important daily part of their ritual of their faith. Okay, this is Turkey, and we are talking about like when we talk about the Alevism, we're talking about starting from, for instance, in the Kurdish part, from Muş, Bingöl, Erzurum, and Erzincan, Bayburt, Gümüşhane, Sivas, Malatya, Kahramanmaraş, Adıyaman, and until Hatay. This is actually Kurdish Alevi cities. But, and then with the Turkish, like Turkmen Alevis mostly, they are living in this side of part of Turkey because they're also very highland. So they're just trying to get some kind of survival. Yeah, this is actually Alevi population, how they live. You see, this is like very flat land over here. We don't see that. And this like flat land over here, they will have like Turkish Alevis, but mostly now they are actually pulled out, most of them, because of the like systematic, continual oppression or pressure over the Alevi population. Yeah, this is like borders of the Kurdish Alevis mostly, and but these cities, except the Dersim we're talking about, the others actually being sort of converted in very hardcore Turkish Islamic minded population. We, for instance, Erzurum, Sivas, Gümüşhane, Bayburt, Alevis even cannot really dare to say that they're Alevis. So they have to sort of hide themselves because of the systematic, continuous arrangement over them. So Dersim is a sancak, although now we're talking about like a city of Turkey, which is, I show here. This is called Dersim. This is not real Dersim, actually. This is actually main, like sort of the headquarter of Kurdish Alevism, because this is the highland that actually during Ottoman, and they couldn't really penetrate in very easily until 1930s when they use like very contemporary technology, like using the planes and through the bombardment and with the poisonous gas, they actually had a huge crime over there, which is, we call it Dersim genocide. Until then, they never ever fully penetrate in this land. And this was actually the land that the Kurdish Alevism had some, like the main, the Ocak system is a kind of genealogy connected to the tribes, and these tribes actually giving the religious service to all these like Alevi community that spread out of there. And actually why they did this genocide over there, because they want to sort of attack the main core center of the Alevism in order to sort of get rid of them. So those are the birds. So normally Dersim is like a bigger place that contain all this. They're all actually the Kurdish Alevi cities or towns, so we call it. Now we have like a small part of it, this part of it. And so presently they're actually dealing with to get rid of this part of it. And therefore they sort of created a kind of project. They sort of dividing like Zaza and Kurd means, they're using the language as Zaza, they're based on the Zazaki, that's they trying to very strongly to define that Zazas are not Kurds in order to like separate from them. And also in the academic writing, they're talking about this land as if everybody, as Dersim this actually, they're talking about this part, that everybody talking like speaking Zazaki, and there is no Kurds like exist there, and academic world very interestingly buying this, which is not true. even in the Tunceli like land, there are like Kurmanji is more spoken than the Zazaki, because there are like 4 towns speaking Kurmanji, 4 towns speaking Zazaki, but the towns speaking Kurmanji is more crowded, so like 2 times bigger than the others. So, and you see it as another like the strategy that China use. So I'm from here, I'm just moving on the like this is sort of physical borders that actually based mainly Alevi created like living on the highlands, but also there are like non-physical borders from both sides, which is, for instance, in the state perspective, the borders for the exclusion of the Alevis, even they are citizens of this country, they've been excluded, for instance, from public sources. And the border for this is like sort of use like security investigation system, and whoever they found out like Alevis, most importantly, if like the Kurdish Alevis, they never ever get into, for instance, police force, the army, and even they get like public, some kind of public workforce, they never promoted. This is the borders that used for the Alevis by the state. And also inside the society, they, in order to sort of force them to convert into Islam and to become Turks, like Turkification process, they also using like some societal pressure method, which is they use like mumsundi, means they like putting off the candles, which means that the background of this, they created some kind of stories that based on the Alevi like ritual that they use with candle, used to mostly candle, because candle, the light is used actually as a symbol of the sun, the fire. So this main worshipping thing is like sun, but the candle and the fire is used as a symbol of it. Using this, and they were like sort of spreading out rumors that Alevi was like getting together, because the ritual of Alevi is that there's no segregation between the gender, so they just do together. And they creating this kind of rumors that they were like having like collective sex, like orgy or something like this. And using this, actually, this is not like a very stupid story they're spreading, but this is a very strategy which make the whole population vigilant to attack the Alevis if they try to carry on with their ritual. So this is sort of kind of like prohibition of practically to have their own ritual openly inside society. And secondly, for instance, food borders. They use food borders against the Alevis. This is actually, for instance, they would not eat anything that actually prepared by the Alevis. They would say this is like haram and this is not halal, and which actually creating a kind of border to exclude them, and is a kind of like daily pressure of exclusion, used for exclusion of the Alevis inside society. Please remind me if I don't have time. I just talk right now. So the psychological borders is even more effective than the physical borders over there. And therefore, if you look at the population of Alevis, this is another issue that Turkey never ever revealed the number of the population of Alevis, because the number is so big. And first of all, they do not want to be like physically seen as a like block of people. And secondly, they are sort of systematically focused to reduce this number by forcing them to convert into Islam and so on. So those borders actually used for the Turkish Islamic synthesis ideology of homogenization of Anatolia, actually. So maybe, I don't know how much time I left. I think I should stop here, and if you have any question, I will answer that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Now we turn to a contribution by Dilan Okçuoğlu. You could take down your PowerPoint and we'll switch our.
Sorry. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And also thank you to Dilşah for being accommodating. Yeah, I was supposed to speak first, then I end up having a trouble with printer. So, okay. So you can see the screen, I guess, correct? Okay. I can also make slideshow. It may be easier, but let's keep it like that. If you cannot see it, let me know, okay? So the title is Ambivalent Governance and Control in Kurdish Borderlands. This presentation, this talk is actually part of my broader project, which I conducted during my PhD in Canada in political science. There are certain points that I, of course, directly take from that research, but also try to update it over time so that I can add something new, something more original on that. And I will also share those up-to-date details with you in this presentation. So the focus here is on the territorial logic of the state, territorial configuration of the state, and its everyday practices, experiences. So for this research, I conducted 12 months long ethnographic research in the cities of Van and Hakkari, but also, of course, in smaller settlements like Çukurca, which is a borderline town right beside Iraqi Kurdistan. I also had chance to travel around the surrounding towns in Van as well as Hakkari. So for this presentation, I would like to speak more about the local experiences of border control, which is understood as a specific mechanism of territorial control, as the border areas feature a complex security landscape and offer an institutional framework in which relations of power and control are negotiated. So I focus on local experiences of border control, and I understand border control as a specific mechanism of territorial control. I will, of course, explain both in more details in the next slides. So for this research, I use ethnographic political ethnography, but also, of course, like institutionalism and process tracing for the broader project. So the main research finding is, as I said, a typology of territorial control. And in this typology, I have 5 mechanisms of territorial control, and I have 5 corresponding experiences of that. So I can, of course, show that typology to you so that it will make more sense when I just, say that here's a typology. As you can see, there are 3 columns. First column shows state motivation. Second column shows these mechanisms. And the third column shows the corresponding lived experiences. And you can see some of these mechanisms are like, there are like diverse mechanisms such as expulsion, securitization, border control, demographic control, as well as nationalizing the landscape. And each mechanism has lived experience, corresponding experience, but it doesn't mean that one mechanism only leads to one specific experience, but it leads to at least one experience, but also it is related to other sort of experiences. And I would like to come back to that in Q&A as well. What is new here in this presentation is the second part, which is the border control part, I think. In that part, I also argue that border control is a sort of governing mechanism. It's a kind of mechanism, governance mechanism used to contain the local, so that the state can make itself in the everyday politics. Okay, so the objectives here are to present, of course, as I said, typology, but also to manifest everyday forms of ambivalent governance in these borderlands. Because these areas are first mountainous areas, they are remote areas, so that's why it's harder to control for a state, for Turkish state, and also these are the areas like both inside and outside domains of maintaining and also contesting state sovereignty, right? So that's why these areas demarcate, but separate, but also they become the zones of interaction. And that's why these are the areas where multiple actors come together and they have some sort of exchange through trade or through kinship. Right. So what are the contributions here? Here in this presentation, I put specific emphasis on the territorial dimension of the conflict. I also have ethnographic focus, or as Idler calls, ethnographic lens on the rural, local setting. And I also want to challenge the conventional arguments proposed by security scholars who especially put the state at the core of their analysis. And I also try to show why it is important to look at those phenomena from the margins. So, as I said, this is part of my broader research, which I hope to turn into a book in the next couple of years. And I hope that my book proposal will be ready by next year, summer next year. So this is the bigger argument. And I, of course, ask a different question in that research. I look at the failures of Kurdish opening and try to understand the role of territorial confederations of state in everyday life and how these interact with the state's democratization, quote unquote, effort at the same time. So, but I show this slide just to make you understand that, that there's also grounded work and broader project which this particular topic relates to. So for today's talk, I would like to, as I said, focus more on this border control aspect. So borders is remade, actually, even if like it is designed at the center, at the official level. What I argue here is that it is remade as a product of interaction between actors at the local level. That is why understanding the border logic here unfolds the challenges and also ambivalences of imagining a distinct borderline, and also it paves the way for rethinking the limits of legitimate state authority in these in-between zones, okay? So that's why I think my talk also complements to Dilshah's presentation, because in that talk, she showed us different kinds of borders. Some of them are imagined, while some others are defined as border lines, more concrete, or we can say material versus non-material kinds. Here for this presentation, I would like to emphasize that I use narrower definition of borders as border lines, or borderlands as border lines, even if I know that borderlands should be defined as border zones, okay? So, so all of these data are from these zero line towns and villages, which are right beside the borderline, the demarcated line. And that's why I chose that picture. In my first slides, it's Hudut Taşı, border stone, which demarcates the border between Turkey and Iraq. It was in prohibited military zone. And yeah, I took the picture. here in this slide, as you can see, actually here, I would like to reemphasize that borders keep shifting according to the dynamics of everyday life, and that's why this creates some sort of unpredictable and ruptured process, which I prefer to call bordering process. And there are two main components of this process, which are onboardering and rebordering. And these two goes together and simultaneously. So onboarding occurs when the state power is challenged and contested in both direct and indirect ways by other actors, as I said previously. And rebordering occurs when state power is shared and negotiated among different actors, so that incentives and opportunities emerge for new actors to get involved in those practices, okay? So this is a terrain of negotiation and contestation. That's why it is fragmented, fractured, and ambivalent. And we are talking about the coexistence of like multiple actors interacting with each other. And the scale here, scale of analysis is local. So it's not necessarily national. But of course, as Idler makes it clear in her like very insightful research on borders in Venezuela, this has its own transnational dynamic or transnational imperative impact, given that these border zones, borderlands, continue to connect lots of groups traveling from one country to another. So as I said, there are 5 mechanisms, but I specifically focus on the border control and its lived experiences. So there are some pictures, but I would like to share some interview data with you, because for this broader research, I interviewed more than 100 people, and it was very insightful. And of course, there were also some challenges of conducting this kind of research. But I was a lucky researcher, because there was ceasefire in 2013-14 when I did this research. This picture is from Çukurca, as I said. It says first homeland. And this is a picture of high-tech panopticonic Kalecol. Kalecol is high-tech security, castle-like security base, military base. And I think in the last couple of years, more than 150 of these built, especially along the borders. So we have to remember that securitization, if we go back to this slide 6, securitization, which is a second type of territorial control, securitization can also go together with border control, right? So we need to, even if this is a kind of analytical contribution, there's no clear-cut distinction between these categories, and I find it important to emphasize that. This is a used bombshell from the same area. There were many of them in those mountains. It was so easy to find them while traveling in the region. In this border town, you could see military base at the top of every hill. Çukurca means hole, kind of like a place in a hole. So it's surrounded by hills and mountains like this. And at the top of each, there's always smaller or larger military base. You can see this in this picture. There's a flag also. Again, This is a picture from the same area. And there were also municipality building and also former police station, which was ambushed by PKK guerrillas. So how does, like, as I said, how does this border control operate, and what are the local experiences of border control, right, on the ground? So as I said, in that chart, in that table, state intends to protect borders because, you know, they try to preserve their territorial unity, territorial integrity. So that's why border control emerges as a mechanism, but it leads to cultural and territorial fragmentation of minority dominant area, because it's also important to remember that the other side of borders are also Kurdish populated in both Iran and Iraq, and of course in Syria, as we know well. So there are also such kind of historical motivations, I think, for the state to exert power in those areas. So in one of the interviews, when I asked people how do they experience borders, or how is their everyday life in borders, do they find advantages or disadvantages? One of my participants said this: illegal border crossings are seen as the violation of state sovereignty or territorial integrity, but they're integral to our ordinary lives here. So in addition to that, another participant also responded that question as such. My mother is from Berbari in Iraq. We are their nieces. I had to bring my mother to the other side. My aunt was about to die. They, means border guards, they didn't let us cross the border. I had to bring my mother by a cart. Just think about it. Most of the words we use are heavily mined with ordinances. We had to open our new roads for ourselves. And in many occasions or so, they complained about landmines, and because landmines they keep moving, right? And even the soldiers who plant these mines, they don't know the exact location. So in most occasions, people told me how dangerous it is for them to use mountains in order to go to the other side of the border. That's the only way to survive. That's how they put it. So as you can see, the same same stories, but in different words. In these next two quotations, Refik, a middle-aged Kurdish farmer, of course, all these names are not real. Of course, I had to change them for security concerns. Refik, a middle-aged Kurdish farmer, was highly conscious of the Turkish and Iranian political context. He also had relatives living on the Iranian side, as his second wife was originally from Urmia, a Kurdish-Iranian border city. Refik traveled a lot in the broader region, so he was also familiar with the political agenda of the Iranian and Iraqi parties. It's clearly shown in Refik's words, to prevent illegal border crossings, infiltration of PKK guerrillas, and any logistic support that would go to PKK, both Iran and Turkey have intentionally built these high-tech military bases along the border in the last 5-6 years. To my knowledge, Turkey also constructed underground shelters along the border. So as I said, border control keeps going together with intense securitization and militarization along these areas. And also another participant said that there is an ongoing competition, territorial competition between state and non-state actors, or between PKK guerrillas and or movement and the state in these areas. That's why these areas are also sites where we can see and observe alternative forms of governance. That's why there is no absolute governance, state governance in these areas. And this also explains why I use the term ambivalent governance in my title. Here, in the words of this participant, both the state and the PKK want to control borders. The PKK wants to control the borders because in doing so, it challenges state sovereignty and even shows its power and capacity to challenge the state's territorial integrity. And from the other perspective, states wants to control because they also want to show their power, and it's a matter of prestige. So that's why borders and borderlands tend to become the epitome of never-ending strife and competition. This is a picture from Turkish-Iranian border gate. You can see it says Hudut Kapısı, Kapıköy Kara Hudut Kapısı. I went to the Iranian border patrol and I didn't cross the border. I came back. And I was traveling with some local people, including journalists, some of whom also were political activists, and also villagers, farmers. So this is an abandoned police station from Turkish-Iranian borderlands. These are abandoned buildings. There's no sign of life, but maybe the image itself, the symbol itself gives a message. And you can also see such kind of barbed wires around these police stations. And so these lands cannot not also be used by people. To conclude, because I know I'm running out of time. So to wrap up, in this presentation, I showed you the typology of territorial control, having 5 mechanisms and corresponding lived experiences, but I specifically focused on the local experiences of border control. I understand it, as I said at the beginning, that it helps us to see all this complex security landscape and institutional infrastructure in those areas, which are the zones of interaction, but also contestation. And unfolding those mechanisms and experiences shows that this situation creates a competitive terrain of compromise and contest for various actors in Turkey's Kurdish borderlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilan. If we can return now to the full gallery screen of all our participants, we'll move to our Q&A portion of our program today. If you'd like to ask a question, would you, if you can move to open up the participants, no, the chat, no.
Yeah, Dominic is raising hand, Elizabeth. Dominic, some people are raising their hand.
Dominic, okay. Go ahead, Dominic.
Thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it, and I learned a lot in this. I wanted to ask Dilan about the photos you took and also your research. Most of the photos looked like they were on the Iranian, Iraq, Turkish border. Did you also look at the Syrian-Turkish border? And can those typologies be applied to those borders as well? Thank you.
Would you like to answer that question, Dilan?
I can also take a few others, and I can answer all.
Oh, okay. Boaz, welcome.
Hey, Dylan, thank you, and thank you both. Really interesting. My question is to Dylan. You described this really interesting dynamics in which the borders are, in a sense, negotiated between the center and the local actors. But my question is whether this is a sort of like a two-way street, or is it basically the state is trying to create stronger, more defined, and more and harder to cross borders, and local actors trying to contest this and kind of create ambiguity about it? Or are there also some local actors that have interest in creating a more strict and defined borders of their own?
Okay, Dylan, why don't you take those two, and then I have a question for Dilsha afterward.
Okay, thank you to both Dominic and Boaz for these wonderful questions. So first, let me start with Dominic's question. Let's go in order. And second one is also challenging. Syrian borders, I didn't go to Rojava. I didn't travel on the Turkish side of those areas as well. But if the question is, I think that's how I understand the question. That's why it's a very good question. If this model can be exported and applied in other similar or different cases, and so if you look at it from a comparative perspective, what can we say? That's a very compelling question. But I can say there are, of course, some similar features, right? Kurds are living on the both sides of borders. We are still talking about strong state presence and security concerns because of that, but also it is challenged by the presence of guerrilla movement and other actors on the ground. And it's a very militarized border regime. And it's getting more militarized as well for lots of reasons, not only geopolitical, I think, but also cultural and economic reasons. So, but I didn't travel there, so I don't have empirical data, but it's a very good question for future research. And second question, I have been thinking about that too when I was developing the theoretical part. So, because yeah, the first part is theoretical and the second part is more applied empirical insights. But I think there are state-defined practices, state-defined processes, and they coexist with these other local practices. That's why I argue that the border control policies might be designed at the center or at the formal level, institutional level, but they are remade on the ground, like in accordance to these ongoing interaction between state officials and other actors. For instance, that's why we talk about the contingency or arbitrariness of state authority in these border zones. When I was talking to people, I remember one of them said that or fathers, grandfathers crossed the border since the 70s. And life was easier in the 70s, 80s, early maybe. But after a certain point, the state pursued a more rigid border policy. That's why it's really hard for us to cross the border in quote unquote legal ways. But this changes from one Turkish soldier or commander, high commander, to another. If the high commander is a friendly guy, quote unquote, then it's easier for us to even make profit out of this trade. But if the commander is a very rigid guy, then the policy changes even in a day. So I can say that it was really hard to find consistency in terms of state policies there. So that's why I really care about talking about this ambivalence and how it makes everyday life in those areas.
Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome.
Okay, I have a question for Dilsha. Thank you for your interesting talk on the Alevis and the many kinds of borders, both imposed, it sounds like, from the outside in terms of naming and so on, but also from the inside. Could you give us a sense of change over time and how the community itself, are there particular leaders who propose or promote certain kinds of boundary making? Are there disagreements on that? Has there been, for example, pressure to stay within the historic homelands and to discourage Alevis from moving to other parts of Turkey? I just was wondering if you could give us a little, place the picture that you gave us today in a longer time frame.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, this is a really very complicated issue, and because the Alevism mostly was based on the rural way of living. So because they were sort of avoiding two central powers, and then they were living on the highlands, and also at the same time this actually made them to have severe poverty, which means that's connected to the class issue as well. So with the urbanization, and when they moved first actually to move to the Europe as a worker, and so this process changed a little bit situation, and because of the regular income and the currency rate, so they had, for instance, many Alevis who were really living in poverty, and their situation has changed, and they moved to the urban. Urbanization actually normally affected to the Alevism as well, because first of all, they physically were invisible, but at the same time, in the daily life, they needed some kind of services that as a community to survive. The most important thing I think was the funeral, because you can survive with many things, but you didn't know what to do with the funeral, with the body of your loved one that you need to take care of. And therefore, because some Alevis, they didn't want to go to mosques to take their bodies to mosques. And secondly, most importantly, mosques didn't accept them because they were thinking, as I said, Alevis as heretic, so they should not be there. And because of that, mostly, that based on that, they created Cemevis. But Cemevis, of course, they didn't really create the right away because it's prohibited, and therefore they first organized as association. And name them as cultural center, because otherwise the state wouldn't let them. So it was really huge struggle, and this struggle actually were sort of took another like wave after the Sivas pogrom, because as I said, in order to force to this border of Alevis to push them inside and then get in their borders, there are like regular pogroms in Turkey. And besides that, there's some genocide. We have like in 1978, like Çorum pogrom, it's against Turkish Alevis, and 78 and Marash Kurdish Alevis, 80 in Çorum, and we have like 1993 the Sivas. Those are the recent ones. Actually, this is, I call it like internal jihad. So they actually forcing the border, attacking the border of the Alevis to get into and to actually sort of force them to make Sunni Islam, Muslim as well. So, and this organization gave both room and was disadvantaged, but at the same time, when they organized as a Cemevis, they become advantaged. But now, another wave coming from the like state homogenization policies through the Cemevis to change the knowledge of the Alevism. So penetrating there and like sort of forcing people in a way, I mean, not like directly, but creating a climate that people who are there like feel themselves to behave, to buy, for instance, Islamic knowledge to sort of like inject into Alevism. So this is another struggle going on. And recently, it is very interesting. You see that how they created like anti-Kurdish idea among the Alevi communities, both Turkish and also some Kurdish Alevis, in order to separate them from the Kurdishness. So because of that, the situation that actually forced Alevis in, they make them to take position either against the Kurdishness to survive. Otherwise, they will know that what they're going to through. So this is the policy, and in full scale is actually using the technology and other like the methods, sort of escalating. I mean, like more intensely applying, because they want to really finish off as soon as possible. So that's the state policy. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much. No, that's very interesting. Floor is open for any more questions from the audience.
Yes, I've got one.
Good, thank you.
So I'm Necla, based in Manchester. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dilsha. I've learned so much about Alevism. I'm Alevi myself, so it was still very interesting for me to listen to your presentation. And Dilan, I'm definitely looking forward to read your book. So my question goes first maybe to starting with Dilan, because I'm new to border studies. Can you give me an example of unbordering? I think you talked about rebordering and gave examples, but have you got examples of unbordering, maybe based on your studies, fieldwork? And then to Dilsha, to what extent do you think that the shifting administrative boundaries, renaming the places from Dersim. Dersim was a big administrative area, then it became Tunceli, and then Bingöl emerged, all these new areas, basically the whole reshifting of the administrative borders and the Kurdish areas once the Turkish Republic was established, and also the changing of the names. To what extent do you think that had an influence of Alevi fragmentation or their identity, or, the governing of Alevis, really?
I can respond now, but I think Mustafa is also raising a hand. If there's another question, I can take both at the same time.
Okay, Mustafa, please join us.
Hello. So thank you so much to both. And this question is for Dylan. Again, looking forward to reading your book. It's great research. Thank you. And that reminded me, Nicole Watt's Activist in Office, especially the chapter on Michel Foucault's new governmentality in the spheres of these mayor, as if Kurdistan, for the mayors to make the governmentality, make the claim of the symbolic politics of new governance, in which there is prestige issue, there is a lot in the shape. So there is a structural relationship with the state and the society, but also a lot going on in between to shape, for example, competing truths or cultural rituals or symbolism to shape the thinking of the subjects in the locality, so that is becoming a prestige issue. And so I'm wondering, this ambivalence could have, if you can think of some cultural rituals that could help this ambivalence, and if you can give some examples, I would love to hear how they do have certain mechanisms to make this working in the locality in terms of new governmentality. Great work. Thank you.
Okay, we have maybe in our official time 4 minutes left in the in our webinar, but we can go a little bit over if you need the time for your responses.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to thank both Nejla and Mustafa for this great questions. It's also good to see familiar faces on the screen. Nejla, yes, the example of onboarding process, which is part of this bordering process, as I said, like the main one. So I think even if I didn't have enough time to speak more about that aspect, I think certain practices of rebel governance, that literature, or guerrilla governance, or all the governance tactics developed by the Kurdish movement, political movement, offer us a repertoire that that challenges this state power, right? This may also connect to, because I was also trying to remember some of the quotations from those interviews, so that I can solidify your question, and it would make more sense, but it didn't come to my mind at the moment. But I still appreciate the question, so I can clarify that aspect in my next presentation. Or I can use an example in the slide too. And I can say this is an example for rebordering and this is an example for onboarding. So that's why I thank you for the feedback. So the second question, I think, as I said, even this onboarding can, because if it has a cultural side as well, it can also relates us to the second question. So what are these cultural rituals? And yes, Nicole Watt's book, article on the subject, definitely. And also I am about to finish a book chapter on Kurdish movement for Güneş Murat Tezcer's book called The Oxford Handbook of Turkish Politics. So that's exactly what I was also, well, one of the, of course, academic sources that I used for that book chapter as well. So one of the cultural rituals, for instance, especially when Kurdish municipalities were on the rise and were in power, they launched, these activists, they launched lots of interesting campaigns that would challenge state dominance in cultural domain as well. For instance, they start to use Kurdish language in a municipality, in that formal area, informal domain. I think it was one of the effective mechanisms to subvert state power and use that area, that quote unquote legal area, to expand the horizons of the movement and its politics. So local governance and politicizing everyday life is one of the tools that were frequently used, especially in the post-1999 period. If I understood your question correctly, I could also give that example, like language, Kurdish language started to use in public space, in municipalities, and municipalities themselves, they began to build laundry mats for women, or local markets for women to sell and make some money for themselves. So I think the point is here that they try to create a new language by politicizing the everyday life, and I think I find that aspect important as well. Yeah.
Dilsha, would you like to address?
Thank you, Nejla. It's very nice to see you too as well. Okay. Yeah, the process that the state right now, the governmentality of the maybe Kurdish Alevi sites, and the full process of the Turkification and Islamization of Anatolia now actually focusing on the Kurdish region. Because if you look at the rest of the Anatolia, actually they succeeded, we can see that. So the most important thing, I think they found it very problematic when the Kurdish people, Sunni or Alevi, doesn't matter. And most importantly, they're focusing on the Kurdish Alevim, because compared to the whole like Kurdish community, is fragmentation of the Kurdish community is very important. Therefore, like the division between the Kurdish Sunnis and Kurdish Alevis become important, and between the Kurdish Alevis and fragmentation based on the Zaza and Kurmanj speaking Kurds. So this is the like divide and rule policy they're using straight away. But the most importantly is still like the policy from the 1930s when they adopted this resettlement law. This resettling process of population that they desire to be Turkified or Islamized is still continue. As such, the main issue that the policy they use, they try to engineer the demography. That means they try to uproot people, Kurdish Alevi people, from the sites that actually they collectively reside, because that means if they reside collectively, that means their religion, faith could be continued as a faith. So because community, this is a sort of real life. So it needs to be sort of survived. The survival based the collectivity. And so they're trying to get rid of this collectivity as such. So they are working on city by city, town by town. So for instance, I just recently, a few years ago, I met some people in Barin. There's like some kind of place that people go and enjoying to sort of I forget the name of the that thermal water. So I just met one of the women, typical like Kurdish Alevi woman. She's really, her hair, it's typical and so on. So I just went to her and I talked to her, just cuddle her, and and she was so happy. And we were talking, and she asked me where I'm from. So I said, and she knew that where I come from, because it's the Alevi community actually have these traces. They know who from where and who from which tribe or Ojak and so on. And she learned that I'm coming from Said family, and she was so happy to see me. Said family means the families who serving religiously to the Alevi society. And then while we were talking, two young women and two young men came. Then this man was like this ISIS beard on this guy, and then had a scar of this, and the women were covered fully. And I was shocked, and they came to us because normally we do not accept it, because these women are Alevi, and these people like typical, very hardcore, like Sunni Muslim, radical in a way. So, and I was like in shock, and she said, they're my children. So her two sons and two daughters-in-law. And this young guy asked me if I was Alevi. I said yes. And he says, he was like sort of ashamed and a little bit, sort of envying or something like this. I said, did you convert? And the answer was, we have to. So that's the forcing people in the villages, and people, if you do not go to the mosque, and if you do not fast in Ramadan, and the dress code is another border actually, because the Alevi people never ever get like cover, they're sort of, there is no tolerance among Alevi people to do that. So, and this dress code also, like they forced to get into. So this is how they do it. For instance, Bingöl now, except Kili, I think one of the town, Bingöl become one of the really radical Islamic place. So they gradually change, and now they're sort of trying to get the Kurdish Alevi of Dersim. So this Zaza project is very critical for them. And anyone who arguing against it, like being exiled from it. For instance, like they sort of organized a social lynch against me, and because I was sort of connecting the Alevism with the Kurdishness, and as like not sect of Islam and like independent religion, and this like ethnographic work and so on. It was really dangerous situation for them, because they're trying to sort of to get like some kind of Islamic, Sunni Islam, particularly Islamic information, knowledge to sort of inject in the society in order to change them. At the same time, they're using like sort of antagonism between the Kurmanji speaking and Zazaki speaking, so to just separate, and using even for instance, the Sheikh Said didn't eat the food of Sayyid Riza. Sayyid Riza is like Kurdish Alevi of Dersim, is Alevi, and Sheikh Said is sort of leader of the Zaza uprising in Diyarbakir and Palu and so on. So it's unbelievable. For instance, Palu and Dersim like sort of made like to an antagonist connection between those. So just like making people to attack to each other. This is another method they used, and forcing people to live there. They use like dam buildings. They're using, for instance, all like typically these dams are built in close to the Alevi sites. So they sort of they use expropriation to like force people out. And besides, they sort of using in the first camp for the Syrian. Like this camp was actually built in the Alevi side, which Alevis are so scared of them, and also they so have like antagonist feelings against the Alevism, and they just like built this camp in like Alevi sites in Marash. So this is, they're not coincident, they're all like done as a systematic way of dealing with the Alevis and trying to sort of scatter them and to make them like to convert into Islam as soon as possible, Sunni Islam as soon as possible. Yeah, this is my answer.
Thank you for those vivid stories. At the level of social pressure exposed and detailed by both Dilan and Dilsha will stick with us long after we have to close, sadly, our webinar today. We look forward to their publications and perhaps to further conversations on what routes are open to peoples who find themselves so thoroughly imprisoned, if you will, by borders of the many kinds we've talked about today. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. Thank Dilan Okçoğlu and Dilsha Deniz for their presentations. And we hope you might be able to join us on Tuesday for our last segment of our symposium, War Crimes and Catastrophe in Today's Global Crises. It will be a session featuring Lauren Carruth and Lara Smith, Building One's Own House, Power and Escape for Ethiopian Women Through International Migration. Thank you again, both. Yes. And,
Thank you so much
and
for having us.
Thank you.
until next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.